What's up, Zox fam? We're back with some more Tribe 9. Now, we're going to be getting into the ultimate farming video. This is not only going to be about leveling. This is not only going to be about farming resources. This is also going to be getting into the par system and making sure that you're making the most out of all the things that have changed and how each of these things actually coincide with each other more than you might actually realize. So we're going to go ahead and dive right into it. Now, just to quickly recap, okay, there were some changes that were made to rifts, this update specific, and not only were these changes made to make them better, but it also made it to where we could farm and get rid of our boosters much quicker. Now, keep in mind that we're able to hold up to a max capacity of 30 boosters at any given time. And so what they decided to actually do, if we go and we take a look at any rift here, this rift now is going to have the ability to consist multiple challenge levels. So with that, you can go all the way as low as to level 10, all the way up to our current cap, which is level 60. Now, one of the important things to note is that level 60 is going to be the only stage that offers you a bonus. Even if we were to drop down to 50, the only thing that you would get for clearing it would be the said drops of that specific rift. Whereas when you bring it up to level 60, you're not only going to be getting the said drops for that rift, but you'll also be getting the bonus resources, which is going to be Kane and TP. These are two resources that we were just deficient of the most when it came down to having a stamina-less farming system. And so they decided to find more ways to implement this, gave us an event, the Luck Phantasma, and then they also then decided that level 60 challenge level was going to give us these bonuses. And of course, with that, you're going to also then have the consumption increase, which now allows us of a max of 3, not 2, but 3 boosters to be consumed. And with that, it allows us to then have that bonus be multiplied by 3. So it just is really, really fast farming that you're basically getting. And not just the bonus, but also the rewards as well. So like the Astral, for example, on this point in case and scenario, right? Now, here's the thing. Okay, there's a lot of things that I don't think a lot of players actually realize with these changes that this was going to affect. Number one, EXP yield. So EXP was also another thing that was heavily adjusted because the only place that you were actually leveling prior to this update was actually the Fractal Vice. The Fractal Vice gave you the highest EXP output. And so you typically see more than likely most players going to Fractal Vice to try to level their account and get their units up to level 50. Now, this has now since been changed and Fractal Vice isn't the main source of EXP anymore. And even at the recording of this video, despite the fact we're operating on the old Fractal Vice is actually going to be changing in the next Fractal Vice reset to the current update Fractal Vice that we're supposed to have. So I'll have a separate video coming for that when the time comes. Now, one thing that I do want to highlight is actually some of the changes that we're going to be seeing with the EXP. And this is something that's really, really big because this is something that is important to each of these cities, not only the ones that we have already had in the game, but also the newest one. So we're currently here at Shinagawa, and we have to actually shout out, this is coming from Reddit, from that one guy, Lucas, okay? Actually put this up, just collecting the data of how much we basically are getting per, like EXP per rift, not really focusing too much on like the extra or excess ads. So it could be more than that, but just for clearing the final boss, this is the amount of EXP that you're getting. So in Shinagawa, a super nice try gives you 57K, mismatched shoes are fashionable, gives you 115K, which is actually fairly high. No place for you here gives you 86,000. Can you pay for 24 days straight is 25K. Healthy outlaws is 25K, and high tech throw is 95K. Now, when you're actually looking at these, it's still going to be important that in some of these earlier towns or cities, you're farming things that you actually need. But there are going to be a couple of different places that allocate a good chunk of EXP, or it seems to be more intended for farming EXP versus the other ones, which is just purely for that doubling of the drops with the bonuses that you get, right? So if we go over to the next city here, which is Minato, Minato is actually going to have Rain or Shine, which makes it a 58K XP dungeon. And this is also, keep in mind, guys, on a ×3, right? You have the 3 running around musketeers, which is 85K, battered inside and out, which is 57K. You have stop following me, which is 63K. And then we are hooligans, which is 86K. Now, again, this seems like this has, I won't say like on average is higher, but it is on average just higher, right? But again, it is still going to be more specific to what you need to farm versus just the EXP. But the EXP is obviously a little bit more I would say averaged compared to obviously Shinagawa. And then of course, moving on into our newest city, which is going to be Neo Chiyoda. Neo Chiyoda is actually going to have only 4 different rifts that you can do. The 5 giant combo, and this is at least for this first portion of the update. 5 giant combo is going to give you 96k. Frenzy Fan Trio is 17. Made in Sibis is going to be 8.6k, and then Ratatata is going to be 19k. Now, we don't know if these numbers were intended to be this low, but again, if you're looking for EXP value, even comparatively to the other numbers, you're losing only a little bit compared to the mismatched shoes are fashionable, which is like 115k. 96k is still almost 100k, which is still really, really good. And that's not including the excess or the extra units that you're actually going to be farming along the way. I would actually argue that when you tally up the extra enemies, you probably will have way more than 115k comparatively to mismatched shoes, where the enemies, even at level 60, are still very, very low in EXP accumulation. So you're still going to be, from what I've come to find, getting more EXP from doing 5 giant combo, just because the ads add up to giving you a huge chunk of EXP comparatively to mismatched shoes. And that's in the very first city or first location that we basically have, or chapter that we have, right? So that's kind of giving you the EXP layout of what we currently have. Now, here's the thing. I think it goes to say, and this is something that I think is really important to note, is that with each of these cities having its EXP ratios, and a lot of people are going to be looking to level their account. I would say if you're more casual, you really still want to be mindful of where you're going, because just because one place is giving 115 K EXP, that doesn't mean the drop itself there is going to be beneficial to you. So even for those that are looking, like if we're looking at like Neo Chiyoda, which is giving what, 96k, the only real reason you would be farming this is for actually 2 reasons. It's one, because of the drop, but then also Neo Chiyoda is currently the only place that allows you to drop tier 9 gear right now. So this is definitely another factor to consider versus the other cities. Whereas like if you're doing Minato or Shinagawa, they're still going to be dropping tier 6s. And a lot of people were speculating or not really too sure if that was intended. I actually think it was intended to be that way, because they actually want players to be, 1, pulling for the character that's currently on banner, but then 2, I think even with the 2 next characters coming, they want people to spend time in the new city. I feel like with the previous cities, we've already spent a ton of time there. And so I feel like for anyone that's working and building up their account, they obviously have to spend whatever respective time there that they need to, but they really want everybody here. So why not make it to where the tier 9 gear drops here? And this is basically one of the main places that you're going to need to be farming in order to get it. Now, again, that does kind of suck, because if you're not farming for the new characters, then these drops don't really offer you too much value. But that's not the only rift that you can farm, or the only rift reason that you could be farming. It could also be for the tension cards too. So there is that, right? And of course you have different dungeons that are giving you resources for even that. So that's just something that you want to kind of consider. Now, the other thing is too, is that with that statement as well, as far as it being a mistake or not, I'm not really 100% sure, but I will say just some of the things that kind of back this thought process is that even when we're looking at, like, for example, what houses most of the resource usage or the current units in the game, the current units in the game are primarily going to be getting resources from either Minato or Shinagawa. We only have 1 unit in the game actually getting any resources from Chiyoda right now. So I think that of course is another factor that we have to also consider, is that with the other ones, it's just really more so about boosting the drops itself versus actually giving us more EXP. I think that even with the average of EXP, the enemies still don't give you nearly as much in comparison to the average on the ads that you'll be fighting plus the boss in Neo Chiyoda, right? So I think respectively so, the EXP ends up averaging out, if not still being better in Minato. It's just the resource drops are still going to be allocated to wherever you need the most. I mean, I would argue even at level 60, it's still going to be better to farm the resource drop that you need versus trying to aim for EXP, because EXP can literally literally be farmed anywhere at this point, right? Now, the next thing I want to talk about here is the PAR system, okay? So we talked about resources, the EXP, which I think resources is subjective to what you're actually trying to build. And really at that point, that thus then kind of determines what you need to farm. But when we're talking about the PAR is a little bit different now. Now, we're going to go ahead and shift over into our gearing, right? Gear farming in the PAR system. And how does this coincide with the rifts? Now, mind you, you're farming your EXP, you're farming your resources, but in that, you're also going to be opening chests. And keep in mind that the PAR system no longer is locked behind Fractal Vice. It is now something that can be taken advantage of anywhere in the game. And so what they decided to do was, instead of it being effective until the 10th, they decided to increase this to 25. Now, this actually at first was like, well, why would it be 25? And this is because of the 3 times with the 3 booster usage that you can do. When you open up a chest, it could give you multiple Pattymons at one time. So this is why it is effective until the 25th, because it just allows you to get more value from one single PAR versus having to pop that many PARs, which would have been on average 3 for you to get the value of 1 currently in this update. So with that, you now have it to where until the 25th 3-star compatible monster is received, you'll be able to receive compatible monsters with one of the substats that is the same as the selected compatible monster at the time of use. And it has a low chance to receive another substat that the selected compatible monster possesses. Now, with that, there's 2 things that basically are going to come with this. And it's not only the chance of you rolling a substat on that piece, and a pretty high chance of you rolling any substat on that piece, but then what it also comes with is a second chance for you to roll another stat at a very low chance. But then it also, on tier 9s, also has an even lower chance for you to potentially roll a gold stat, okay? So there's 3 things layered there, and we're gonna kind of talk about this, right? Now, real quick, let's actually talk about using the PAR and really honestly identifying how these cities are all different. Now, when we're looking at like the normalized stats that we had prior to, it really wasn't anything based around like the specific towns. I would even argue you really didn't start to care too much about the Pattymon system until you were relatively ready to do Fractal Vice, right? Now, if we actually go and we take a look here, and I want to talk about this for a second. Let's actually go to a character. And let's talk about the implemented stat values that you now have to consider, because this is something that is being pushed in this city specifically that I don't think some players even realize. But when you're looking at just stats that will typically fall or be farmable here are going to be some of the new ones that were added. So life absorption, regenerate, you have shield expansion, you have sword and spear, you have backstab, and you have ninja footwork. Okay. Now, just to kind of give you a little bit of an idea of what these stats do, life absorption does health restoration off of damage you deal. Regenerate is like, say, for example, every 3 seconds you restore X amount of HP. Then you have the shield expansion where you'll be able to grant yourself a certain amount of shield based off of a certain amount of HP. And then you have of sword and spear. This will increase give you a multiplier when you're basically doing things like, if I'm not mistaken, I think it's deflect. Yeah, so deflect counterattack. It'll give you a multiplier of 50% at the base. And this is for 30 seconds for your primary, secondary attack damage multipliers, right? And then, of course, you have up under that backstab, which allows you to do some scale damage from the side and the back of the opponent. And then you also have ninja footwork, which ninja footwork isn't exactly a skill that you can use in combat, but it is something that will allow you to basically decrease the awareness of your targets that are near you. So I'm assuming there might be like some sort of stealth content coming at some point, so it's less likely to be detected by enemies by sound during exploration. So I'm assuming that's when you're running really fast. It just makes it less likely for them to like hear you coming by. A really weird and not really too sure how this scales in the game at this point, but I mean, hey, it does exist, so it's probably going to be something that we'll get later on, or might be more useful for characters like Ichinose. So I guess it just kind of all depends. But the other stat value that is going to roll quite a bit, and if we actually go back into the rarity, is actually going to be substats for characters. And specifically, like I mentioned before, is going to be Hinagiku, which is one of them. The the other two that we can't see right now is going to be Saizo, if I'm not mistaken, and Ichinose, right? So I feel like those two characters, they're or all three of those characters, they're all siblings, the Akibas, are all stat values that you can also roll for their skills even right now, right? Now, the reason why I'm bringing this up is because what a lot of people are probably going to do or have been doing is they'll get a piece from this chapter. And let's say this chapter, you got a piece like this, right? Because you get tier 9s as soon as you start really playing deep into this chapter, you got a piece like this. And it's like, oh, cool. I like that Regenerate Plus, and I like that of Sword and Spear. So I'm going to use the par on this piece, right? Now, what's going to happen is it's going to just keep emphasizing, even on your bonus chance rolls, for you to get Regenerate, for you to get of Sword and Spear, and then, of course, that defense too might have a chance of rolling. Now, here's the thing, though. These stats at top are already being emphasized in this chapter. So these aren't really the stats that you want to start aiming for. And what I noticed is that until I changed how I was using my par, I kept getting gear that only rolled these stats. Now, the thing is that you do want these stats for, say, like, for example, we're building Hinagiku. She can use Regenerate. She's good with of Sword and Spear. The problem is I was trying to get stat values like crit damage multiplier 4, and then even say at that time I was trying to get crit rate, and it was just really hard to get them to show up. I was just like, what the heck? Versus when I actually decided to shift my par usage to a piece that had stat values that weren't being emphasized, and I went for a piece with crit damage multiplier 4 with the damage cut rate plus, that's when I then started to see pieces like this, right? Where I then got pieces with the damage cut rate plus, crit damage multiplier 4, and of Sword and Spear. And all I really was trying to emphasize was stats that weren't being already emphasized, if that makes sense, right? So just to kind of make that more contextualized and kind of simplify what I'm saying, is basically that within each city, it seems like, especially with this chapter and how they implemented it, it's actually emphasizing more of the stat values for the new stat values and the stat values for the new characters that's already in the game and are coming, versus some of the stat values that you might have been seeing a ton of or a lot more of in like Fractal Vice. So with the manipulation that you still are basically able to take advantage of with the par system, you want to actually try to, in my opinion, try to aim for stats that you aren't going to have already being kind of almost self-pushed or force-pushed, because of the fact that you're in that city grinding that specific thing, which are the tier 9 pieces. So I found more success with getting pieces that gave me more of the things I was needing, which was the of Sword and Spear, but then I was also guaranteeing I had a higher probability of getting that crit damage multiplier 4. And that's how I was actually able to get my pieces to look more like this, and kind of flesh out a lot better for myself, versus a lot of the other pieces I was getting was literally just giving me of Sword and Spear, and then I would get Regenerate. I was getting a lot of the newer stats, and it was really cooking my chances of getting some of the older stats that I needed on that last slot, because it's then rolling. Like, again, this is like one of the things that I'm like, again, trying to paint this picture is you have to look at how many stats you're rolling against. Like, so you subtract the two stats that you're basically trying to guarantee, and then you then have to look at how many other stat rolls you could basically get. There's a lot of other stat rolls that you can get. Granted, you're only rolling 3 stealth stats, but that's still rolling out, potentially in a big pool, right? That's a pretty big pool now. So if you can try to guarantee more than not that you're going to get those two, then you can guarantee that there's a chance that you have a better chance, at least, of getting that third to roll a little bit better, right? So that's just basically that. Now, as far as, using the par system, it's really simple outside of that. I just want to kind of point that out, at least what I've noticed. They might change this in a future update, but I'm just really speaking to where it's currently at. There's obviously going to be some variations in this and some people's luck, but I've done quite a bit of farming doing this, and I noticed that there really is a high emphasis and push on the newer stats versus like your crit damage, your your standard attack percent. Obviously, even with the other characters, you're never really going to see any of the other characters being rolled skill wise. You're going to only really see the newer characters, right? So again, I think for what it's worth, it's definitely there and something you want to pay attention to. All right. So with that, guys, that's basically everything, right? Just making sure that you guys are getting the most value out of the dungeons itself and really out of the par system. Everything else is just going to boil down to what you exactly need to farm. So we're going to have another video coming in the future, actually talking about the new changes that are going to be happening to the Fractal Vice, which I'm actually really excited for. We're going to actually stream that as as well. And that's something that I like, again, feel like I'm glad they kind of separated them so that we could kind of digest, bite off what we could chew from these updates and then kind of, you know, add more to it at that point. But yeah, guys, that's basically going to be that with this one. If you guys have any questions, don't be afraid to ask in the comment section down below. Again, there's a lot that goes into the EXP farming and what's more efficient. But I will say that with all of this, this is going to be the easiest way for you to get some of the better gear. And of course, for you to also level up your characters as fast as possible. I would definitely say you could farm like, you know, the bosses. You could obviously still do things like Fractal Vice, but the EXP now is so much higher. And the EXP that you need for 50 to 60 is just so much more that you want to do the things that are a lot easier to do versus like just farming the boss, which for some people might still be hard unless you're using a really OP strategy, but I digress. But that's going to be basically that with this one, guys. I hope this video was able to help all you guys. Stay blessed out there, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.